and welcome to another fun episode of Creepy and Geeky. On this episode, Preston Fassel returns. Preston is the managing editor of DailyGrindhouse.com and the author of Landis, the story of a real man on 42nd Street, and the recently returned Our Lady of the Inferno, both available from Encyclopocalypse Publications. Welcome back to the show, Preston.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're gonna actually make this a regular thing now. I announced it on Twitter about a week or two ago. We're gonna talk some grindhouse movies, some 42nd Street goodies, as much as possible. Get into the weird, which I'm not as familiar with a lot of that stuff. I'm a mainstream guy, so this will be definitely an education for myself.
I look forward to it. I love sharing this stuff
with
people. Yeah, one of my great joys is in sharing the weird, strange, flew under the radar, like 10 people saw it movies that I have in my mental Rolodex.
Yeah, definitely like the stuff you were posting that you used to write about early issues of the second volume of Fangoria.
And I hope to I have to continue bringing that to Daily Grindhouse, to podcasts like this, and continue to share the gospel of the strange and obscure.
Definitely, yeah. I can't wait to get into some of the very weird stuff that I'm sure you can bring. All right, and today we're going to be talking about, I guess it's the semi-weird. It's probably not as low class as some of the stuff you might be bringing us. But, today we're talking about two movies by William Lustig, Maniac and Maniac Cop. We were talking about doing another movie, and I'm not exactly sure how we got onto it, but I suggested doing these two, and you were all for it, which was great. So, and luckily they were both on Shudder, so it made it a little bit easier to watch.
And Maniac is a movie that I've got a very strange relationship with. I'd heard about it for years in the early days of the internet as one of the most disturbing and violent and subversive movies that you could ever see, and just, saw it whispered about in these hushed tones in the darkest corners of the mid-90s internet. And of course, you read that as a teenager, and your immediate response is, I've got to see this. Yeah. And for years and years, tried to hunt it down. And then finally, a buddy of mine and I went to this used bookstore in Tulsa, in Oklahoma. It's called Gardeners, and it's actually still there. And it's a converted warehouse. It is just a giant warehouse that is full of used books. And
that's awesome.
It seems it's amazing. And anytime I go to visit my brother up there, I always manage to always try to stop in. And in high school, it seemed like anything I could possibly want or hope to find, you could find at Gardner's in the book section. And they also had a movie section at the time, which is very heavily VHS. They were starting to get DVDs, and that was a little bit more hit and miss. And I was there this one time with a friend of mine who was also very much into 42nd Street cinema. He was slightly older than me. He knew a lot more about it than I did. And I just thought to myself, I know I'm not going to find it here, but I might as well at least go look and see if they've got it. And sure enough, they did. And awesome. So I got it, and we went back to his apartment, and his roommates were all home, and some bandmates of one of theirs. And we sat around and had an impromptu Maniac party. And so for as kind of reprehensible as the movie is, I've got some weird nostalgia for it. When it came out on DVD one time, it seems like this might be the 42nd Street movie that's gotten some of the most DVD reissues. And I can't remember which reissue of it was, but at the time I was in college, and I had gotten swine flu. And I was laid up from work and school, and coming off of having like 102-degree fever. And I was living at home and going to college at the time. And my mom actually surprised me and got me the DVD reissue of Maniac to watch in the final stages of my recovery. So it's this thing that's popped up at these like different kind of strangely sentimental moments in my life. I don't know what that says about me, that this is a movie that I have sentiment for, but it's a reason I enjoy talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. I had never seen it until I watched it this time on Shutter. I'd heard of it, definitely for sure. People have been talking about it for years about, just it being, like you said, vile and disgusting and just, one of those, hard movies. And I'm just like, and when I watched it, I was like, I don't know, this wasn't really that bad. It's kind of tame. And I guess it's just, over the years, for the time that it came out, yeah, it was disgusting and gross. And we've now had so many other movies that are just more extreme, and even in mainstream movies that have become more extreme, that a lot of this is tame in comparison now, especially, I mean, even when you talk about something like Silence of the Lambs, or just anything post that, like anything with serial killers just seems to be just delve into that seedy, grimy kind of thing. And I can say probably Maniac was probably one of the few that delved into that in that way at that time, that kind of led, not necessarily desensitization of it, but helped open that door for that kind of stuff, at least from my point of view. Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely a game changer at the time because it was weirdly on the cusp of being a mainstream grindhouse movie. They poured a weird amount of money into the ad campaign for this thing. They really tried to make Maniac happen, and you can go out there and find these pictures. I can't remember which theater it was, but the grindhouse that had the premiere of it, the entire front of the theater was essentially converted into a giant version of the Maniac poster. And like the
Wow.
marquee and the doors and the windows are all just festooned with like all these advertisements for Maniacs, that you drove by this theater or walked by it and you got hit with this. And they had like this premiere with like limos bringing Joe Spinell to the
Wow.
theater. So like they really tried to kind of make this sort of a serial killer taxi driver and get it to break over
Yeah.
into slightly more mainstream cinema. And for anybody unsuspecting who went into this thing, for whom maybe Taxi Driver was the most extreme thing they had seen,
Yeah.
it had to have been really shocking at the time. But like you said, now, in the wake of like New French Extremity, stuff like
Yeah.
Martyrs, even some of what's his face? He did Antichrist.
Oh,
It's not.
oh,
Is it Lars von Trier? Did Lars von Trier
yeah,
do
Lars von
Antichrist?
Trier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
kept wanting to say Paul Verhoeven, and
I've
I know that wasn't
I've
right.
no, I've never actually watched Lars von Trier stuff too either, because I've heard his stuff is extreme. So I'm like I don't know. And that's the thing with me. Like, it's not that I'm really grossed out by anything like that. It's just I want it to serve a good story. And I'm not saying that, because I've never seen anything by Lars von Trier, so I don't know. I've heard good things, but at the same time, I'm like, is it just extreme for extreme's sake, or does it serve the story? So
Hit and miss. House the
yeah,
Jack built, not so much, but Antichrist is pretty solid. But at least for the most part, it is at least in the service of a narrative
good,
versus something
good.
like Maniac that is kind of abhorrent with murder.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's I yeah, watching it, I was really, because I think I read afterward that it's very much and I could see this when I was watching it, which is very much another variation on the Ed Gein legend. And so, I mean, and we've had that. We've had Psycho, we've had Texas Chainsaw. We've had so many variations on this theme that it just, to me, it felt retread like. And again, with being, now in 2022, when I saw it, the harshness, it's like, I love the Evil Dead movies, and the first Evil Dead was, supposed to be one of the most extreme movies ever. It's a, grueling experience in terror, and I love that, but it's not scary. It's not that extreme to me in today's age when I saw it either. So, it's funny to watch this, and I appreciate, the time period that it could come out in, that was, extreme. I keep saying extreme, but that's really the only word for it. So
yeah, I imagine that seeing that movie in New York at the time had to have been something of an experience because in that environment, it probably did not seem that far off from something that could actually happen. And
Right.
unfortunately, a lot of that is stuff that probably did actually happen in New York around that
Right.
time. It was an extremely dangerous time for anybody, very dangerous time for women, especially sex workers. And so, in a kind of dark way, Maniac is something of not quite documentary.
Yeah.
I want to say what 80, 81. I'm losing cred as I speak.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's 80, 81, somewhere around there.
And then, of course, you look it up and people just want to give you the Elijah Wood remake release date.
I want to watch that now. I haven't watched that one yet, but I've heard it's not bad, you know.
It's okay. It very much soft pedals the character. It's very much kind of a retread of Red Dragon. They basically turn the Joe Spinell character into Francis Dollarhide. They really play up the love interest angle, and they also make him much more sympathetic and much more struggling against his impulses. It's okay, but it feels even more like a retread of other serial killer cinema than the original does. They released it the day after Christmas, 1980. And so, that's only like 3 years removed from the Son of Sam murders, from the 1977 New York blackouts and the riots that came around that. So, watching this in 1980 as a New Yorker, there had to have been that extra layer of fear to it, that like this guy could really be slinking around out there. And that's something that I really appreciate about the movie. I've actually got a background in abnormal psychology. That's what I went to college for. I was part of this generation that saw Silence of the Lambs as a young person, and we all thought we were going to grow up to be Clarice Starling and catch serial killers. And then I burned out of that hard. But I appreciate that the movie does something that a lot of other serial killer cinema doesn't, in that I think it really places you in his mind and in his shoes. And the way that it's shot and the ambiance and even the set decoration of his apartment, it's like everything you're seeing is filtered through this guy's diseased mind. And not a lot of serial killer movies do that and really replicate that experience and put you in that uncomfortable position of kind of going for a ride inside this person's head. And I think that's something that's, other than some of the special effects, has allowed it to age relatively well.
Yeah. And speaking of the special effects, it was pretty much Tom Savini that was doing all that. And I love the sequence with him getting shot in the face. Like that was pretty good. I'll admit that, and it was a fairly decent effect, especially for that time period. And I can imagine that seeing something like that on screen at that time, because I wouldn't imagine there was much comparable in terms of even horror movies, slashers and everything like that was a guy getting shot right in the face. So especially from the point of view, also because they do have that point of view shot of the gun coming down right in front of him. So I enjoyed that piece a little bit.
They actually shot through the windshield of that car with a 12 gauge. Yeah. You're actually seeing I believe it's actually Tom Savini who does it, doing a stand-in for Joe Spinell, and he actually blasts a real dummy of himself with the head full of stuff. And they didn't have a permit to shoot this thing, and so they had a car on standby, and so Tom Savini blasts this thing, and then everybody jumps in this car and speeds off. And I don't know if this is an urban legend or not, but supposedly the next morning some joggers called it in, and NYPD came out there and found this dummy in this car with this destroyed windshield.
Wow. Yeah, I did not read that, so that's interesting. Yeah. I'm going to accept that as fact. I don't care if it's an urban legend or not. We're going to go with fact on that one. Yeah, no, it's like, I wouldn't say overall that I enjoyed the movie. I thought that, for, like I said, for its reputation and everything, it's one of those things that, not having seen it in its time period, that I feel more removed from it, and so that I don't have, like, you being able to see it in the 90s at least was still relatively closer to that time period. For me, seeing it now, I enjoyed it for what it was. I was a little disappointed too because everybody's like talking about how it's very seedy and shows you like the real New York and everything, but we don't get a lot of New York scenes really, like not outside, and not so that was a little disappointing for me. But it didn't really take away from it. It just was one of those things where it just removes me a little bit. But
And this is the weird thing too, is each successive release of this has cleaned up the picture more and more. And
right.
each successive release, I feel, loses something in that.
Mm.
This, to me, I feel is one of these movies that is meant to be seen on a gnarly VHS that has maybe been watched, 20, 30 times before and is starting to wear out. Because the very first time because the very first time I saw this on VHS, it just seemed like the seediest, nastiest, grimiest looking movie. And like I remember coming out of it thinking, man, all the stories about New York in the 80s are true. It really did look like the eighth circle of hell. And then when my mom got me that DVD and I got to see it cleaned up for the first time, I was like, well, this isn't as nasty as I remember it looking. And then, you watch the version on Shudder. I'm not sure which version that is, but I know a couple of years ago, they came out with a 4K restoration of it. And I like jokingly wrote like a pissy letter saying that like, you shouldn't be doing this. This is a crime against Maniac to have a 4K restoration.
That's funny.
It really benefits from the janky aesthetics of lo-fi technology.
I think the funny thing is like I really like that to a certain extent. I appreciate the upgrades to 4K type stuff like that. I do think that with movies like this, especially movies that are cult movies that are from that 42nd Street kind of era and stuff, that it would be nice to have a dirty version of it on the 4K as well. Just have just an SD version that's just crap, just so somebody can appreciate just what that looked like on VHS, in the 80s. So, just picking it up at the store. What is this? So that would be fun.
I would love to see that, actually. That's a great idea. Have like janky versions of these things on the DVD where you can watch that version if you want and get that experience.
Yeah, I think that, if they can find an existing copy of it that's not cleaned up, that they can do, or, even if they have to, I would hate for them to have to do this, but to digitally degrade it in such a way that, it would emulate that in a lot of ways, darken it, put some grain in it, do whatever they can to make it just dirty and gross. Because I hear that a lot from people who watched a lot of the horror movies of the 80s on VHS, and how now that they're seeing it on Blu-ray and 4K and all that now it loses some of the charm, because you can see how stupid some of the monsters look or whatever, where before that darkness of videotape just did not, it helped hide all the warts and the seams and everything else. So I appreciate being able to see it like cleaned up and everything, but yeah, it would be fun to have that as an option on some of these discs, especially the stuff from like the really oddball, off the wall weird stuff that comes from like Vinegar Syndrome and Severin and Blue Underground and all those other ones that are just they do the weird stuff. So that'd be a fun option for a lot of those.
And you're really right, for some of these that lo-fi does add to it because it covers up some of the warts and doesn't draw such attention to things. One of the movies that I wrote about for Fango in issue 2, it's called both Dark Sanity and Straitjacket. And this is one of these movies that I got for like 25 cents on VHS in like the final days of VHS when all of the video stores were clearing out their stock. And it's patently not a good movie. It's got some interesting ideas that it completely undersells. But the version I saw on VHS, it was really eerie looking, and it had this really creepy ambiance to it because it seemed like everything had like either this fuchsia or turquoise tint to it. And the interiors seemed really dark, almost like they were all shot places where the windows had been covered up with film or something. And the first time I saw it, it was actually kind of spooky because everything just kind of felt wrong. And then in going back to rewatch it, when I was going to write about it for Fango, I actually found a cleaned up version streaming on Amazon Prime. And it was something about the way the VHS had degraded, because you watch it on Amazon Prime and it looks just like any made for TV movie shot in the 1970s. And it took away any creep factor that the movie had. And like any scare quality that this thing had is completely gone just by virtue of them cleaning it up and making it look like some run of the mill, like this thing might have aired on Saturday night on CBS in '76.
That's funny. You gotta imagine too, like when people first saw it though, which version did they see? The crappy made for TV looking version, or the dark cruddy version that you ended up seeing later on? And which I mean, I would imagine they would have seen the version that was the more of the made for TV version, and that may have been why it didn't do well too. So no ambiance, no nothing going for it in terms of visuals to help add to that. So that's pretty funny. But yeah, I going back to Maniac itself, I felt the story was interesting, especially the fact that this woman that comes into his life, this photographer, comes into his life, and he falls in love with her, and she likes him, and that kind of quells his, to an extent, not fully, but like he doesn't want to kill her, which is interesting because every other woman that he encounters up until that point that we see, and even afterward, he just straight out murders. And so it's interesting that this one person could quell that in him and calm the beast a little bit, at least for her sake. And I found that interesting, that that aspect of it, because you didn't really see that in in other versions of the Ed Gein story. So I like that each version of Ed Gein's mythology has been twisted in different ways to present a different side. So
and it's especially interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's especially interesting because that kind of got foisted on them. Bill Lustig and Joe Spinell's original concept was much more this kind of slice of life, like month in the life of a serial killer story that was just him basically stalking and killing people with almost no narrative to it. And it was this grungy, almost kind of creepy docudrama style movie that really wasn't going to have a narrative. And at some point somebody was like, we can't sell that, we've got to have some kind of story. And I can't recall if they were dating at the time or if they had dated in the past, but Joe Spinell actually had a relationship with that actress in real life, and they were able to pull her in and get her involved in this. And so all of those scenes were almost afterthoughts, and you end up getting some of the more interesting narrative aspects of the movie out of these elements that really weren't even intended to be there to begin with.
That is interesting. I didn't know anything about that. I would think that more of a documentary style slice of life type of thing would be definitely a little bit of a harder sell, especially at that time. Post Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, I think that probably would be a little bit easier to do. But I think even that had a narrative. I haven't actually seen that movie, so they did something similar with that Behind the Mask. So I can see where not having a narrative would be problematic at best. So it's I did enjoy that aspect of it. So it does, for me anyway, as somebody who enjoys stories, that was definitely a plus.
I wish they would have done a little bit more with it. And the thing that gets me is they introduce it so late. And Joe Spinell was apparently very charming in real life, very personable, and did not have trouble getting dates with anybody. versus in the movie, the way that he acts and looks and behaves, it's like there is a clear divide between the two. It is not like this guy is being played by George Clooney, where just by virtue of the way he looks, he can, very easily attract successful, good-looking women. And it's like you watch an hour of this guy like dripping sweat in like grimy t-shirts and like nasty Carhartt jackets, and then all of a sudden he throws on one sports coat and he's got these beautiful photographers falling all over him. And they really could have built up to that in a way that wasn't so unbelievable.
Definitely. I could. That was the one thing for me too. I was like, how's this guy? He wasn't that charming. He's not that great looking. He's, like you say, he's sweaty. He's gross, in general. And like, how's this guy? Like, how is she just falling all over him all of a sudden? So yeah, there's definitely was a disconnect in that part of the story for sure. Which is another thing that again, like, I appreciate what they were going for with it. And like you said, like with being that it was a movie that was of that time and trying for something very specific in terms of pushing that kind of serial killer stuff to another level. I think that they do a decent job at that. But yeah, story wise, having that, like, not having an idea for a story and then kind of cramming that in, you can kind of feel that a little bit.
There's one thing that the remake does better, although I feel like the remake relies on it a little too much. But it's Elijah Wood playing him, and it's Elijah Wood basically playing the kind of stock Elijah Wood character of like this quiet, shy, sensitive, scheming guy, and he looks like Elijah Wood. They don't really try to grunge him up too much, so at least that comes across as more believable and is handled, and they pay more attention to it too. It is much more of a focus of the story from earlier on, that like this guy wants to try and like break out of being a serial killer and have this normal life. And they introduced the potential love interest much earlier in the Elijah Wood version, so that they've got the room for the story to develop there.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out just to see how it differs, and I don't know, see if I like it any better.
It's not bad. I got to see it for free at a horror convention. It was a fun way to kill an hour and a half.
So that's never a bad thing, for sure. So, do you have anything else you want to say about Maniac itself? Any other tidbits?
Kind of going back about how Our Lady of the Inferno is back in print with Encyclopocalypse. This movie is sentimental enough for me that I had to get a shout outs to it in there. And there is a scene in the book where they are in the main character and her boyfriend go to see Maniac and are heckling the movie. I wanted to immortalize it in some way, and it seemed as appropriate a way to do it as anything.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. I bought it on Kindle right around the same time I bought Landis.
Thank you.
But I'm definitely going to pick up that audiobook on Audible here when my credit clicks over in a couple of days, because I definitely want to check out the full audio cast version that you were talking about. That seems very interesting with the amount of people that are in it.
Yeah, that was a very ambitious idea that was launched before COVID. Because at the time that work on the audiobook began, I was still with Fangoria, and between Fangoria and then Mark Miller, who runs Encyclopocalypse, used to be Clive Barker's production partner, and he's maintained a lot of professional relationships. And so between the people I had access to via Fangoria and the people I had access to via Mark, it seemed like, hey, let's not just have somebody reading this thing, let's do a like full scale, fully cast audio drama with original music, and really go balls to the wall with this thing. And so we got Doug Bradley, we got Mick Garris, we got Barbara Crampton. It was really cool. I actually got to direct the Barbara Crampton segments myself. Awesome. She was in town. Yeah, she was in town for a horror convention. It was really cool. I got to go pick her up at the airports, and we talked about the book in the car on the way to the recording studio. And she asked me questions about the character. I mean, she is such a consummate pro that she took this as
Yeah.
seriously as a film role and was asking me, about the character's backstory and motivations and how to play it. And she was doing different takes for me in the studio. And that was just a really great memory to get to direct Barbara Crampton as a serial killer. And when
awesome.
when she freaks out in the first kill scene, Barbara just went bonkers in the studio. I had to go. I have chronic allergies. I'm chronically sick. And so in my briefcase, I always had a bag of Ricola. And after her recording session was done, I went and got her my Ricola and gave them to her and went and made her a cup of hot tea because she could barely talk afterwards with all of the screaming and growling and grunting and just like completely freaking out. And that was really great. But then, COVID hit right in the middle of production on this thing, and right in the middle of sound design and scoring. And the guy who was doing the score went through this string of bad luck related to COVID and kept delaying that. And then another sound engineer was having stuff that was delaying them. And then we were having trouble getting one person's lines to sound right. And so this thing was finally wrapped up during COVID. It was a very ambitious project, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I think that it's a cool little cult oddity that has the spirit of what it's paying tribute to.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to give that a listen. I've had a hard time reading anything of length for a while now, and so audiobooks have been a good friend whenever I've been wanting to duck into a book. So that'll definitely be awesome to give a listen to once I can get it here in a couple of days. So that'll be fun. So yeah, and everybody else who's listening, check it out, because it's all connected to everything else.
And
so
go ahead. I was just going to say, you get to hear Barbara Crampton kill Mick Garris, which how often you get that. And Doug Bradley is a Polish gangster, so
that's awesome. Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun to listen to for sure. Very cool, very cool. All right, I'm trying to think. I don't have anything else from Maniac offhand. So let's just jump into Maniac Cop, which I actually enjoyed a lot more. That was some goofy fun. You got Tom Atkins and you got Bruce Campbell just having fun, like fighting off an undead cop with a ginormous chin. I mean, you got Bruce Campbell, who's known as the Chin, and you got Robert Zadar, who's even bigger chin, and the two chins clash. So that's that just was gonna be a great movie for me anyway. I'm a big Bruce Campbell fan, obviously being a huge Evil Dead fan. And Tom Atkins, I mean, that dude can do no wrong. He's so good in everything. So, but
he's still alive.
Dude, it's crazy. And he's like, he's been jumping on these documentaries, The Search of Darkness and everything. He's still, not only still alive, but he's still like going strong too. So it's great. It's awesome. I love him. He's one of those ones that I didn't even really know much about until I started really deep diving into horror the last few years. And I'd seen him in Lethal Weapon and stuff, so I knew of him sort of, but to know that he was so prevalent in horror and genre movies was like, because now I've caught up with The Fog and Halloween 3 and Night of the Creeps and
yes.
Yeah, Night of the Creeps is great. We definitely got to do Night of the Creeps. So but yeah, and like even he says Night of the Creeps is his favorite movie he's ever done, so which I could totally believe. So I don't know, can you hear my baby and my grandson?
Oh no, I think there was actually somebody who's walking their dog outside of my apartment. Because I'm on the ground floor, and right in front of my patio is like this big kind of park area, and there was just somebody out there with a puppy.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, my grandson's being really loud in the background, so Yeah, but yeah, so I really enjoyed this movie. It was definitely a lot different, more cohesive, and I think that has a lot to do with Larry Cohen writing the script.
Yeah. Yeah, and like they're
He's
actually being a script.
yeah, actually being a script rather than just I don't know. I guess Maniac just seems more like set pieces for sure, and
Mhm.
Maniac Cop definitely felt more like a movie. Yeah. So, what do you want
It
to?
was really interesting to see Bruce Campbell in kind of a more serious role. Like I'm very
Yeah.
used to seeing him going for these intentionally kind of over the top. I'm used to seeing him play
Yeah.
Ash. And like you
Yeah.
really get the idea that like Bruce Campbell kind of is Ash a little bit in real life, and that Ash
Yeah.
is maybe just an exaggeration of himself, and he's playing like a burlesque of himself. Versus here, he's playing like this grungy, grimy cop who's cheating on his wife and who
Right.
apparently has been going through like really bad marital counseling with her, and she's like afraid that he's going to hit her. And like it's weird to see
Yeah.
wacky Bruce Campbell playing like this character that like maybe 10 years earlier would have been a Bronson role. It's
Yeah.
interesting to see him against type.
Yeah. It was funny too because you watch him, and this is about a year after Evil Dead 2 when this came out, and it's fun to watch him because he is in a more serious role, but his face betrays him a lot of times. He's kind of overacts a little bit on his face, not necessarily in the way he's delivering lines, but his face kind of overacts just once in a while. It's not very often, but he's more used to that Sam Raimi, Cohen brothers, style of acting, and so it's fun to watch him in this, trying to struggle against that in a lot of ways. Where because this movie is very goofy at times, but he's really having to play it straight, and it's fun to watch that for sure because it's definitely a darker role for him, at least in terms of it's more serious. Yeah, it's not a goofy character. All the weird stuff is happening outside of him. So yeah.
It was really interesting to watch this because I had actually never seen this before. This was my first watch, and it was really interesting to go into this blind in 2022 in like the whole Black Lives Matter era and like Back the Blue era. And this is a movie that's has aged really well, actually. And I'm surprised that it's not something that gets brought up more in contemporary horror discourse, especially with a lot of the scenes, like the people on the street. There's that montage about how people don't trust the cops and about their views on the police and their views on policing in general. And like some of the lines that the people say in those talking head segments, it's like you can hear that on the 6 o'clock news today.
Yeah. I noticed that too. It was it just shows that people have had a good distrust of the police for a long time, and and rightfully so. As I mean, New York, being New York of the 80s and stuff, I can, you kind of understood that. It's like New York and LA, and Chicago, the three big cities of this country where the police are always seen to be somewhat corrupt, somewhat not good, whereas like most people assume that, oh, okay, small town cops are okay to an extent. I mean, you get the corruption in there too. Yeah, but I mean, more small town white America.
Yeah.
So you get a little bit more, oh, those are the okay cops, because when you get into the big city, everybody gets corrupted, blah blah blah. And so it was interesting to definitely see that, like you said, that it, for something that came out in 1988, to see those people talking about, and literally you could see them talking about it in the same way they're talked about today. That was interesting and fun to see just how nothing has changed, which is sad. So
it's something that's great about it because you can look at it in the context that it came out in and like understand where this came from, because this is coming in kind of at the tail end of the Giuliani, Ed Koch, clean up New York movements and all of the backlash against the New York of Joe Spinell's Maniac.
Yeah.
And, I've heard stories where the cops were basically given carte blanche in New York City to
Hmm.
do what had to be done to, quell the tide of drugs and violence that had reached this fever pitch. And so I can see this as this like very dark late 80s satire against the whole gentrification of Times Square and the police involvement in that. And
Right.
then you look at it today and you can see it in the context of everything that's going on today. So it's this thing that very comfortably exists between two different eras.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this should definitely be one of those ones, like you said, that should be viewed and watched today. One, it's a fun movie, and two, that within that context of Black Lives Matter and defunding the police and everything, just to see what that's like, especially to see, because even in this 88 New York, they may have been in the middle of cleaning it up, but it's still pretty dirty. It's still the New York of the 80s. It's not that clean yet. So it's, which is interesting because I actually went and visited New York City a few years ago when at my previous job. And, Times Square, I got to visit Times Square real briefly. And it was cold because it was February, I think, when we went. And so it was cold. There weren't a lot of people out. It was cold and it was kind of drizzly, kind of gross. And so, there were people out, but New York was still gross, even in Times Square. There's still garbage on the streets. There's still, that New York that you've always heard about still exists. They may have glitzed it up a little bit here and there, but it's still, and it's definitely not the 42nd Street New York. They definitely cleaned that stuff
Oh
up.
yeah.
But, I didn't feel like I was going to get killed, at least, every corner. It just felt dirty still. But definitely didn't feel like I was going to lose my life there in Times Square, like you see in the 80s movies, and anything previous to the 90s, that you felt that just watching that you were going to get stabbed. So yeah, it's definitely a different change for sure.
Yeah, talking about Bill Landis. After the Landis book came out, somebody got me an entire run of the original Sleazoid Express.
Yes.
And going through it, I can't remember what movie it is he mentions, but he actually saw a guy get stabbed to death in the theater right in front of him. And he's like talking about this movie, and like it comes down to like at the end of the review, and he's like, and that's the last thing this poor son of a bitch ever saw. Just think about that. Easy. And it's like, geez. And then I went there. It would have been 2019. And I had the exact same experience. It was like, one, why are there mountains of garbage on every street corner? And two, this place feels really safe. I was so excited to be there. I didn't want to go to sleep. And I was walking around, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and, never for a second thought, oh, somebody's going to jump or mug me. And I'm a very paranoid person. I don't go anywhere without some kind of armament. I actually used to have weapons hidden around the office, like Dwight Schrute on The Office, because of my level of paranoia. It was not like ninja stuff, but I had a couple of cans of mace and a knife in my desk. But New York was cool. Let me walk around at 2 a.m. wearing a suit and tie. I'm not scared. I'm not afraid. The really surreal thing was going to the Port Authority and seeing like cops with like full on like 12 gauges and machine guns standing around out front.
Wow.
And I was like, well, I guess this is why I feel so safe.
Yeah. Any minute the cops are going to, gun you down like that. That's crazy. Yeah. It was, like I said, it was dirty. It was gross, garbage everywhere, but I never felt like it didn't feel like I was going to get attacked for sure. It just, it was, I didn't spend too much time just because it was cold and we had gotten in real late and I was tired. So we were just, walking around real quick just to give me a sense of, New York and Times Square. And I'd gone back again the next year, I think, or 2 years later, for a convention up there for the New York Comic-Con. And we were staying just over the river in New Jersey, right, like literally right down the street from Carlo's Bakery. which was cool because I used to watch Cake Boss a lot. And that was fun because we would just take the ferry across, or the subway across, or whatever. And it was that was kind of fun because at that point we were in the daytime, and we'd walk around a little bit. Like after the con on one day, we walked around, we went and got a slice of pizza or whatever, at one of the various street side pizza joints and everything. And I just gotta say, by the way, New York pizza ain't shit. I mean, come on, it's fine, but it's floppy and big, and it's just weird. It's greasy as all hell. And I know that's probably part of what everybody likes, but come on, that ain't pizza. Give me some Chicago deep dish. Come on. But yeah, I walking around with everybody. I never felt like I was in any danger, which was interesting and fun to just say, hey, I walked the streets of New York. And I didn't get to walk around a lot of that stuff, but I think I got to see where they filmed Saturday Night Live.
Oh, cool.
I think so, maybe not. I'm trying to think now. I know I passed by one of the Playboy clubs, like that was there on one of the streets. It's, I don't know, New York's crazy and confusing. But yeah, Maniac Cop was, getting back to that, you still got that feeling that it was dangerous in that movie, that and not only were the negative element dangerous there, but the cops were too. And not just because of the the Maniac Cop that was involved, but some of the cops themselves weren't good people. So but it was a fun it was a fun movie because of that. And just to see this Maniac Cop guy, Robert Zadar's character, Cordell, just taking out everybody who wronged him, the corruption. I mean, because that was what it was really about, was the corruption of these other cops and everybody else, led to him going in and killing everybody who wronged him and set him up and sent him to jail to save their skins. So it was interesting to see that, like we said, just with the cops in general, and just nothing has changed. It's all still the same.
Going back real quick, I actually found it here because I've been doing annotations. It was actually a showing of Creepshow.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. On a personal level, I ruined the experience of seeing a double bill later that day at the Newark Triplex Drive-In. As our car pulled in, Leslie Nielsen's screaming face was even visible on the other side of the screen. More lethally, a patron of 42nd Street's Cine 42 was stabbed to death as an argument broke out during a showing of Creepshow. Just imagine, this drivel was the last thing the person saw on this earth.
You call a Creepshow drivel, man. That's
weird
crazy.
Opinions about movies. I don't always agree. I love his writing style. I don't always agree with his opinions. And this was a time and place in New York where going to see a movie, you could see somebody stabbed on screen and then potentially be stabbed yourself.
You stabbed yourself, yeah. Oh man.
There's this crazy story. One of the guys I interviewed for the book, Mad Ron, who did the Mad Ron's Previews from Hell trailer compilation. He actually was working as a grindhouse projectionist at the time, and he told me the story. He was on the sidewalk talking to his manager, and somebody ran by and bumped into his manager and then ran off. And then a couple of minutes later, his manager realizes, one, his wallet's gone, and two, his stomach is bleeding. And he says his manager at the time was this 400-pound guy, and he had this very large stomach. And there was so much padding there, he did not realize that when the guy ran up to him, the guy had not bumped into him. The guy had actually stabbed him in the stomach, with a penknife to distract him while he stole his wallet. And it's just standing right in front of the theater there on 42nd Street.
Man, I don't think anybody misses that version of New York.
That's the crazy thing. Like everybody that I talked to in researching that Bill Landis book was like, yeah, you could get stabbed standing on the streets. And this one time, me and my friends were walking home and we got jumped by this guy with a broken bottle. And I got robbed in the theater like 27 times. And I miss it so much. And
Oh man.
it's like there was this
Why?
weird, the only thing that I can parse is there was like this weird kind of like thrill of survival to it. It was like this
Yeah.
idea that like if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And it's like there's this idea of like we are the toughest human beings on earth.
Yeah.
And like we may be in danger, but also anything can happen. And so it was like this weird, like almost your life was a drug. And just by like waking up in the morning and knowing that you might get stabbed or you might see a really amazing show made like the thrill of it all worthwhile.
Yeah, I guess I can understand that. I mean, that's definitely not how I live my life. I like to be as safe as possible. So I don't like to take that that kind of chance. I would not like to travel back in time and live in 1970s or 80s New York City. No. Overall, I enjoyed this movie a lot. I dug the New York City of it because you definitely get that dangerous feeling. I like the overall story of it. I loved Bruce Campbell playing against his goofy nature, and love Tom Atkins in it. Even though Tom Atkins bites it about 2/3 of the way in.
No.
It was very odd because it's so sudden. It's he's so good in it up until that point. It's a genuinely good movie that I find interesting. We had originally talked about doing Maniac Cop 2 with these two, but we bumped that to another episode that we're going to do. And when I watched that one, but when doing a little bit of background IMDb research, Lustig says that Maniac Cop 2 is probably his best movie. So we're gonna have to leave that to the next time. But I don't agree. I think this one was much better than Maniac Cop 2. So we'll definitely have to get into that in the next one. But it's this one just has so much fun. It's so goofy. You don't even see Cordell's character, and even when you get the flashbacks of how he quote unquote died, even a lot of that's in shadow, so you really don't get a good look at him until close to the very end of the movie. And I think they do a really good job at the makeup effects, just making him seem just like just slightly undead, which was a great, I guess not twist, but a great aspect of the movie. So
yeah, they definitely left you wanting more. That was something that I really appreciated about it, is they did pull off this kind of like Pinhead Freddy Krueger thing where you barely see the monster in its first outing, and then when you finally do get to see it, it's cool makeup, because I'd seen stills from the movie and I think from the sequels before, so I knew what he looked like going into it, even though I hadn't seen the movie. And I was a little bit disappointed that you don't get to see it so much. And as the movie's going on, I'm thinking, okay, I at least appreciate what they're doing. They want to tease you, they want to leave you wanting more.
Yeah, because you see his hands a lot. You see, just his body. They shroud his face, or use camera angles to keep you from seeing it, and which is great. I mean, they're definitely keeping you in suspense the whole time, and I think it's interesting too, because the makeup work is actually really good, and it is disappointing because you almost feel like they're hiding it in a way to, like, because they don't like the way it looks, which is a real shame, because it's really good. It's not bad at all, especially for 1980s,
I know.
which was the height of that practical effects stuff. So it looks really good, and it's very disappointing you don't get to see him a little bit more, especially because he had that that chin, so it when you do see him towards the end of the movie, it's great. But yeah, you wish you would have gotten to see him a little bit more, because in Maniac Cop 2 they go in a wildly different direction with the makeup effects, and or a more extreme version, and it's not the same. It really takes you out of it. So I don't want to get too deep into it because we really got to do that one. But yeah, it's but this one was fun. I comparing both of them, I really like Maniac Cop a lot more than I liked Maniac. Maniac just seemed like we said, a bunch of set pieces, loosely formed around a narrative, which makes sense because that was kind of foisted on them, but which I think was the better choice for that. I mean, I don't think a documentary style would have worked unless you did something in a way that would have you would have had to do something that would have had some kind of narrative to make it work. But yeah, these were definitely fun. I could definitely see both of these playing, and maybe not. I mean, like you said, Maniac played the grindhouses. I don't know if Maniac Cop did. Maybe by 88, I'm not sure how prevalent they were on 42nd Street at that time. But Maniac Cop seems like something that I think that one went to theaters, but it probably didn't stick around very long.
I think that one was a wider release because there were still a couple of grindhouses hanging around by the end of the 80s. The early 90s is when the last ones went down. But
Right.
With the names and the talent attached to this one, I think this one was a wide release. Bruce Campbell, like you said, he was just coming off of Evil Dead 2, and then Richard Roundtree still had some name recognition, and Tom Atkins and Larry Cohen had some more mainstream stuff. So I think that one was a wider release.
Right. Yeah.
I've played 50 theaters.
Semi-wide, a semi. Yeah, for the 80s, it wasn't wide release, but not bad. So we definitely not in the thousands like we have nowadays.
Oh yeah, I think it was probably one of these like low budget horror movies that really found its life on like HBO and on home video.
Yeah, and I'm in regards to that, because thinking about it, I would have to assume that the VHS market and rentals and everything kind of helped kill 42nd Street in a lot of ways, because you had a lot more of these movies, the stuff like Maniac, and even some of the other weirder stuff, finding life on VHS, and kind of, at least in terms of giving a broader appeal to people that wouldn't have been able to go to the stuff on 42nd Street. And so I'm sure that, in addition to, VHS killing the porn industry, not killing the porn industry, but killing porn theaters and everything for a good portion of that, I would imagine that had a contributing factor to it, as well as them trying to clean up New York.
Oh yeah, and in their writing, Bill Landis and Michelle Clifford even talk about this, about how you suddenly had the choice between going and seeing these movies in the theater and potentially getting stabbed, or staying home and being able to pause it and go to the bathroom and not be afraid that you were going to get jumped in the bathroom. And so even the domestic 42nd Street audiences were flocking away from these places because it wasn't worth it for them anymore either.
Yeah. Well, and that's parallels a lot of what's going on today, and with theaters and VOD and stuff, that we're, with the pandemic and everything, we're starting to see this shift towards, sort of, when it was at its height, we were seeing a lot more of the studios willing to transition some of these high profile movies onto the streaming networks and into VOD and everything. And it's starting to kind of come out of that, which sucks for a lot of people, because a lot of people still aren't comfortable going to theaters. And I, for one, I like theaters, but I don't love the theater experience. Generally speaking, I like being able to sit at home and pause a movie. Like we said, pause a movie. I like having captions on, because you miss stuff in all the action. So sometimes there's stuff that gets drowned out, and there's a lot of, for me, there's a lot of pluses just to watching it at home now rather than going to theaters. So I still go to theaters. I just went last night to go see the Batman. And
I'm going to try and see that this afternoon.
it was really good. I still like I was talking to my son last night about it because he hasn't seen it yet, and he was asking me like where I put it on in terms of the Batman movies, and I was like, well, I think for me alone, the high water mark is The Dark Knight. That's my favorite of all of them. And then I feel like the Batman, it's like Dark Knight, then Batman Begins, and then I'd say the Batman is pretty high up there in terms of it's got good style, it's got a good story. That 3-hour runtime I thought was gonna drag, but it actually it's you don't feel that 3 hours. It's paced well enough that you don't notice it. So I'll give it that for sure. But it was fun. I don't feel like it really does anything new or different in terms of anything, but it's an entertaining movie in itself, and I'd like to see sequels to it if it does well and people enjoy it. I think that we'll probably get a sequel or two out of it, so that'll be nice.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
The fortunate thing for me working from home now is that I can go duck out and see a matinee in the middle of the day because I like the theater experience. I don't like theater audiences.
Yes, exactly.
I've had so many like big prestige movies kind of ruined or just had the experience lessened by the other people in the theater, like Wolverine. When Hugh Jackman dies at the end, like somebody in the audience like started yelling at the screen. They were like, "He's dead. That's bullshit." And it's like, did you not come into this movie knowing that that Wolverine was going to die?
This was the last Wolverine movie.
Yeah. And so, I mean, here's this incredible, I had seen all the X-Men movies in the theaters. The very first one came out when I was in high school. And so, I had like kind of grown up and like gone through all of these big significant life changes along with the X-Men movies. And, this is the last one. And here's Wolverine dying. And like, it should be this incredible moment of like catharsis for me. And then I've got somebody screaming at the screen. And then I went and saw, what was it? It was the Alien movie with what's his face and the flute, Michael Fassbender.
Prometheus.
I think it was the one that came after the Prometheus.
Covenant.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I haven't
seen that one yet.
It was a cool Friday night action film. And I'm really digging it. And, you got the xenomorph on screen and like homoerotic Michael Fassbender flute play. And the person sitting next to me in the middle of the movie puts on a pair of headphones with an MP3 player and jacks up the music so loud that I can hear it coming out of their headphones. And it's like competing with the stuff on screen.
Yeah.
And then when we went and saw Hereditary, there was this couple sitting behind my wife and I who were just yammering away through the beginning of Hereditary, and like we have this running commentary. And my wife, she's a high school teacher, so she does not put up with shit from people, and she just actually stood up and turned around and said as loudly as she could, "I didn't come here to listen to you talk, thank you," and then sat back down, and that finally shut them up. But still, the beginning of Hereditary, it's very tense and it's very broody, and it's like some of that tension gets ruined when you've got like these two 22-year-olds behind you being like So it's nice now to actually go and see a movie where I'm like one of 4 people in the theater and actually be able to enjoy the theater experience without other theater goers.
Yeah, we went both my kids work at an AMC theater, and so my daughter and I went to go see it yesterday, and we went to the open captions version of it, which was great because I'm like, thank God they're finally doing movies with open captions. They do like 1 screening a day, which is usually, sometimes we can make it if it's timed at a time we can go to, but yeah, it was great because it's also, nobody wants to go to the open captions showings, so we had maybe I want to say 10 to 15 people at most in this theater. And so it was great. We were over in our own section, and I like to be up at the very top, as close to the middle as possible. 1, so I don't have people behind me, because I don't like having people behind me. That's so annoying. And then 2, because I like to be dead center. So usually I try to do that. We were slightly off center, but for the most part, we were pretty good. And it was so fun because again, with the open captions, it's just right there on the screen. If you miss something or it's very quiet, you can just read along with it. And I loved it. It was so good. I definitely recommend that to anybody who has that where they like captions. Go to the open captions. I don't know if every theater's doing that now. I think it's starting to become a little bit more common, which is great, even if it's just the one showing for the big movies. Because they don't do it for all the movies. It's usually just whatever the big movie is right now. Yeah, it was awesome. I enjoyed that a lot. I've had similar bad experiences. The last few movies that I've gone to that were big, Scream, we went, and unfortunately that was kind of a packed theater, and we had some people up in the row in front of us. We were down near the bottom, and so we had people in the row that was in front of the walkway area, and one guy was over to our left, and he kept looking at his phone, full brightness, up high, so you could even see what he was doing. And I'm like, this is so annoying. And then during the final sequence of everything, when everything's going nuts on screen, they're like hooping and hollering, like the whole group was, and talking. I'm like, I can't hear what's on the screen, which is crazy because the sound is always jacked way too high for me in my old ass ears. And so like that's another plus for staying at home, because I do not like it when the music is, or the sound is so high that it's just like insane. It's like, okay, just drop it back like two notches for me. I don't need it an 11, drop it down to a 9. Okay. But yeah, that, and then Spider-Man No Way Home, it was generally a good showing, but it was very packed because we were trying to catch it on opening weekend. It wouldn't have been bad. Yes, it sucked that it was so packed, and I don't like packed theaters, but we were thankfully up in the back row. But the guy next to me, because this AMC sells alcohol, had a beer, and I'm not an alcohol drinker. I don't like alcohol. And so the smell of beer was just getting to me. Like, at least it kind of went away after a little bit. But in the beginning, I was just like, oh God, this again, theater experience, not always what it's cracked up to be from me anyway. I like it. Don't get me wrong. My wife and I would do marathons. Like, we'd go, and even just a few years ago, we went the Christmas that Greatest Showman came out. We went and saw like 4 movies in one day on Christmas Day with my daughter. We all 3 went and just enjoyed watching 4 movies back to back, which is always fun if you can. It's a butt number, but it's definitely fun if you can do it. So,
and my brother and I used to do that. We worked at a Cinemark when we were in college, and it was right across the street from a Potbelly's. And so on our days off, we got free admission to all the movies there. And we would go watch a couple movies, go have a sandwich at Potbelly's, come back in. And the Cinemark we worked at only had 6 screens. And so we would see every single movie that was showing at the theater, like regardless of whether we were really interested in it or not, because, we were going to college, working part-time, and then we really didn't have a lot else to do. And so all of our spare time, we were just watching all the movies. And we got to see some really cool blocks. I remember one time it was Memoirs of a Geisha, Capote, Brokeback Mountain, Cache, and I can't remember what the 5th one was, but we got some pretty good programming blocks out of that.
That's cool. Yeah, my wife and I did the biggest marathon we've done. We did a 6-movie one.
Oh wow!
Back in 1996, when it was a lot easier to, like, when they had more show times. It seems like nowadays they've got the show times a little bit more off, that it's harder to do that unless you're going to have like an hour between each show, which is not a bad thing, but when you're wanting to not take all day to do it, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But we went I think we did it was basically 6 movies. I can't even remember what all the movies were now, but it was fun. It was, we haven't, I think the best we've done since then, we did a 5 movie, a few years ago, And 4 is typically our max now if we can do that. But yeah, it's fun to just sit through. But I couldn't do I've seen some of them were doing all the Marvel movies like leading up to Endgame. Some people some theaters were doing multi-day, like all day long. I think they were actually doing the whole 48 hours or however long it was going to take to watch all 20-ish movies to get there. I was like, no, there's no way I'm doing that. That's too crazy.
The most I ever done in a single one was 5 back to back. And that was this all-night horror movie marathon that my brother and I went to back in 2010. And they did, it was cool because you didn't know what 2 of the movies were. There were 2 secret showings. Wow. And if you stayed through the entire night, you got some of your money back and free breakfast. Nice. And yeah, it was really cool. It was Return of the Living Dead, The Burning, House, the Japanese House, okay. This movie called Night Warning, which is just absolutely fucking bonkers, and then Race with the Devil. And House was one of the secret showings because this is before it had been released by Criterion Collection, and this was part of this theatrical promotional tour that it was going on to get people excited for the Criterion release. And we went into that. Yeah, because we went into it absolutely blind, not knowing anything. They were just like, okay, here's the secret movie now, and then they played it. And we had no idea what to expect. Have you seen that one?
I haven't. No, I've heard good things about it, but I haven't seen it. Yeah,
we got to make that one of the things that we do, because it is not like anything you have ever seen before. The best description I've ever heard of it is somebody said it's like if Dario Argento had made Beetlejuice. Okay. That's probably the best description of it. If Dario Argento had gone to Japan and shot Beetlejuice in Japan.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
but it is
definitely. I'll admit I'm not the hugest Beetlejuice fan, but that does definitely make me want to watch that. So
stylistically, the way it's made is not like anything you have ever seen before. What's cool about it is the script was kind of being written by a little girl, because Jaws had just come out, and the studio told this director, "We want you to give us the new Jaws movie." And there was all this pressure for this guy, and he couldn't come up with anything. And his little girl was drawing pictures, and he would say, "Well, what are you doing?" She's like, "Well, I'm drawing a picture. These girls are going to this house, and there's a vampire there." And he'd be like, "Okay, keep talking." And sitting in front of his typewriter, and "Well, what are they doing now?" And he was taking these stories that his little girl was making up, and then weaving them into this movie. And there is an unhinged quality. If you've ever talked to a little kid and told them to make up a story, the way the movie unfolds really kind of seems like this is a narrativization of a little kid telling a story.
That's interesting.
But it's great.
All right. Yeah. Definitely gonna have to look into that, find that. I like I said, I've heard good things about it. It's one of those ones that I have a never ending list of stuff I need to watch. And that's what's great about doing the podcast now. It's giving me the chance to watch some of this stuff, kind of forcing me to watch some of these things that's been on my list for a while. So that's definitely an added plus. So yeah, we'll definitely have to add that to the list of stuff we watch and talk about on here.
It is fantastic. It is a fun movie.
All right, cool. Anything else we want to say about the 2 movies we talked about today?
No, it's been a blast. This has been great.
Yeah, no, they were definitely fun. I can see where they kind of complement each other in a way. William Lustig, I don't think, looking at his body of work, he doesn't do a lot. He hadn't done a lot. I think he's done more writing, more producing, in compared to his directing output. But I think there was 1, maybe 2 movies between Maniac and Maniac Cop, and so it was. Go ahead.
I was just saying this movie called Vigilante.
Oh yeah, that's the one with Robert Forster. I think that one's on Shudder also. Yeah, I think that one's. I think I have that one on my list. Yeah, it's weird. Shudder dropped all at once. a bunch of William Lustig stuff: Maniac Cop, Maniac, Vigilante. Just a few, but it was an interesting batch. But so yeah, all of those are available on Shudder. And I think Maniac Cop 2 was on Tubi. I think that's where I watched it. So yeah, definitely got to watch that one. So our next episode is going to be about Maniac Cop 2. So we can continue with this. And you have been talking about this other one with me that we're going to combine it with, which has some interesting touches to the Maniac sort of series in a way, called The Psychopath. Why don't you give us a little tease about that?
This is the movie that both asks and answers the question, what if Death Wish, but instead of Bronson, it's Mr. Rogers?
Which is like, okay, yes, I'm sold.
It is a delightfully unhinged film. I cannot wait to discuss that one with you.
Yes, I definitely cannot wait to watch that one. I have yet to watch that one. But yeah, your description, and we've been talking about it a little bit. It was just like, okay, I got to see this one because this just sounds completely weird. So yeah, definitely. We will continue doing these. Like I said, Preston's going to be a regular contributor here, which will be great. Just getting with the kids being not having much of an opportunity because of their work schedules and everything. I needed to bring somebody on that could help me add some more episodes here. I appreciate you, Preston, agreeing to do this with me regularly.
Yeah, I enjoy doing these. It's a blast. I love talking about this stuff. I love sharing this stuff with other people. So it's great.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I think we will close it out here, and everybody stay tuned for the next one, and
stay creepy.
Stay creepy. So yeah.